Love lives here.
So, beloveds, it is time for our focus statement, time to speak our focus statement into existence, and realize our focus statement, realizing the truth of our statement, realizing the intention of our statement, and making it real, to realize it. So let's say our focus statement together, shall we? Here we go. We embolden people to live their highest potential through the transformative power of love. I'm going to do that one more time because it feels so good. So here we go. We embolden people to live their highest potential through the transformative power of love. Yes. And I am so grateful that we have this at the very center of who we are as a community, as Riverside Center for Spiritual Living, that it keeps our mind stayed on the truth. It keeps our mind stayed on why we come together as a beloved community and do the work that we do together in service to the high vision of Centers for Spiritual Living, which is a world that works for everyone and all of creation. And so our part in that as Riverside Center for Spiritual Living is to emboldening people to live their highest potential, to realize their highest potential. And of course, we do that with the transformative, and we do that through the transformative power of love that each one is, because we know that love lives here, and love lives here within each one of us. So this morning is already July. Half the year is gone. It seems, I was sharing with Shelia and Justin and a few others that the year seems to be flying by, and yet it's doing this weird time thing too, where it's just kind of feeling slow and elongated, but yet flying by at the same time. There's this different relationship to time that we're experiencing right now. But we are in July already, and here at Riverside Center for Spiritual Living, we are working with the 2020 themes that Centers for Spiritual Living Worldwide is working with. And this year's theme is 2020 Spiritual Vision. And the theme for the month of July itself is Unchained Spirituality. And so we will be looking at different topics within this larger theme for this month. And as I mentioned at the top of the hour, I'm excited to share with you some of my dear friends to bring their wisdom in and to share their wisdom on these topics as well. So we'll be having some conversations here. So I'm very excited about that. So our first guest this month is a dear friend of mine from CSL Greater Las Vegas. She is a native of Pasadena, California, studied English literature at UCLA, and got her master's degree in human development at Pacific Oaks College. She worked for the federal government as an administrator for 25 years before becoming the executive director of the Susan G. Komen Foundation in Honolulu, Hawaii. In 2012, she moved back to the mainland and moved to Las Vegas, where we met at Center for Spiritual Living Greater Las Vegas, and she began her practitioner studies. And she became a practitioner 2 years ago this summer in 2018. She recently co-facilitated the Equity and Inclusion Group at CSL GLV over the past year, and is currently working on Healing Conversations for Our Time with fellow practitioner Clay T. White and interim minister Reverend Colleen Tanaka, whom we know here at Riverside. And they are working to reveal hidden beliefs about racism and bias and begin the discussion process for healing the community. So please give a very warm welcome, a warm Riverside CSL welcome to my dear friend, Shelia Callum, practitioner and spiritual powerhouse. Welcome, Shelia.
Good morning, CSL Riverside. It's such a pleasure to be here.
And it's such a delight to have you with us, Shelia. I'm so excited that you are here and that you said yes to entering into these conversations with us here today. So the talk title for today that was in the outlines is Free at Last. And when we were working on the themes for when we were working on the themes last year, we came up with these talk titles, we didn't realize how appropriate they were going to be in this time. And Free at Last, of course, refers to the very end of Dr. King's speech, I Have a Dream, in summer of '63. And so we wanted to talk today about what is freedom? What does it mean to be free? Because we put the question mark at the end of the Free at Last. We have it free at last, question mark, meaning are we free yet? And what does it mean to be free? So Shelia, what, from your perspective, what does it mean to be free?
It's interesting because when Martin Luther King said that, I have a dream, it truly was his dream. It was his vision for what freedom one day would look like when all brothers and sisters would join hands and sing that old spiritual song, Free at Last. Ernest Holmes says freedom is the birthright of every living soul. So it means that all people are born free. But are we all free? That's the question mark. There are many people around the world in different countries that are not free. And there are people right here in America that are not free. The truth is that America is the land of the free, but are we really free? No. There are people of the Black and brown communities, LGBTQ communities, Native American communities that have not bought into being free because they don't feel free. Black Lives Matter says the truth is before we can celebrate freedom for all Americans, we have to fight for the freedom for the Americans that we deserve. So, what does it mean to be free? Free for me means to be able to live and to reach for that God-given potential that I was given. But has it happened? Yes, in some areas, and no in others. So that question still exists. Are we free? Not quite.
Not quite, yeah. Well, and, here at CSL, Ernest Holmes said in our Declaration of Principles that we believe the ultimate goal in life is to be a complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. So, yeah, for sure.
Yes.
It's an ongoing evolutionary process that if freedom is the ultimate goal, according to Ernest Holmes, freedom is the ultimate goal, then it would still stand to reason that we are still working toward that goal, individually and collectively, perhaps. And so how do you think we might, how are you walking this path toward your freedom as a spiritual being on this planet?
I am walking this path by doing what I can do, what is mine to do. As Martin Luther King said, if you can't do great things, you do small things in great ways. And I'm taking that to do the work. I've had a inclusion and equity group that I've been co-facilitating with another very wonderful practitioner at our center. And we've been actually talking about these issues for over a year now. It started off with a book study and actually morphed into real deep conversations on race relations, inclusion, and actually systemic racism. So I think each of our work is to take what piece of this that we can do and actually do that work, because now is the time. We're called on as centers for spiritual living, as churches, as synagogues, every living worship center to stand up in this moment. Now is the moment to stand up and actually be heard. Silence is no longer an option. So we have to push forward to really bring out these issues that we've already know that a world that works for everyone.
And so I love this idea of this equity and inclusion group that that you've been doing, and it was based on small great things, the
Yes.
book Small Great Things initially. So what have you seen come out of that work? toward advancing the community, your community, toward freedom. Community being CSL GLB.
Yes, exactly. We've seen people who ask the question, what is racism? We've seen people who didn't believe that racism still existed because we were post-racial after our first Black president. We saw people who didn't believe that there was any exclusion. And those are the very people who came to our group and were open and actually were willing to dig deep and do this work. And it's not easy. It's not easy having these conversations when a lot of people were steeped in and brought up in racist ideology and didn't even know it. They didn't even know what it meant to feel exclusionary towards some groups. And we actually broke down some real barriers and took a good look at some of the things that society is offering, and actually seeing that there's a lot of work that needs to be done from a deeper place. So that group has now moved into healing conversations that we're going to be having with the entire congregation and community. So we're opening up the avenues and the awareness for change.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. That's so exciting. And so with that, how then are you using the spiritual principles of science of mind, the spiritual principles of, new thought, spiritual principles? How are you using that and applying that to the work that you're doing there in Las Vegas?
First of all, we do everything through prayer and through our awareness. And the first thing that we are doing is to being open, honest, and authentic, leaving anything that we have thought and just being open and willing to express truth, number one. And we're listening. We're actually listening to each other. We're being open and supportive, standing up for the little microaggressions that all of us have seen and heard and are speaking out. We're speaking out. We're speaking with one voice, knowing that God is all there is, and anything else outside of that is not truth. We are also calling a thing, calling injustice an injustice, and actually bringing spiritual principles into that and knowing truth. We're also continuing conversations, and we're going to continue conversations within classes and also anywhere else that we can take this. And then number one is educating ourselves, educating ourselves to truth, and using what we know in classes and spiritual principles to take it outside into the community as our world work.
I love that, calling a thing, right?
Yes.
Because you can't fix what you will not face, right?
Absolutely not.
And so have you received a little bit of pushback for calling a thing?
Of course.
Or are people are they unfolding with that and working with that idea?
Of course, they because as I said earlier, there are a lot of people who don't believe that there is injustices in that way. And a lot of people, and particularly in our communities, who, believe in, who actually use other ways of calling a thing and not actually calling it that, not calling it out, and not standing up for truth. There are people who are engaged in spiritual bypass and not wanting to believe that people in our centers are also have implicit biases. So what we're doing is trying to dismantle what the actual looking of racism looks like, and actually breaking it down so that we can see the spiritual truth.
Beautiful. I love it. I love how you're bringing the spiritual truth to doing the work, because I shared with our community here, and I believe you and I talked about this the other day, of our faith and philosophy is really poised to be a liberation theology. It's really poised to really set us all free. That we have this technology within our philosophy of, like you said, calling a thing, realizing that it's there, and then saying, you know what, this is not working for us. And so then what do? We know we need to set a new cause in motion. If we want to see a new effect, we have to set a new cause in motion. And it really sounds that that's kind of what's happening there, that, you're approaching this work with that in mind, of calling the thing a thing and then really beginning to shift. Is that the way you're going about it?
Absolutely. You're right on. You can't, as you said, you cannot heal what you can't reveal. You got to be truthful about it, and you got to call it out and stand up in that truth. So we believe, and what we're doing is having these open and honest, sometimes very tough conversations, but doing it anyway, knowing that it's the right thing to do, and knowing that this is the work that we were called to do. It's not my work, it's the work that we were called to do from Spirit.
Mm-hmm. And it's our collective work, doing it individually and doing it collectively, right?
Absolutely.
So the idea of freedom is a complete emancipation from all discord, that there is a complete emancipation from all discord within ourselves, but also within our communities. So for you, what do you think that freedom might look like for yourself personally, maybe locally, and even globally? What does that freedom? What would that freedom look like if you? Because I know you're part of the Vision Corps for GLV as well. Yes. So I know you're open to a higher vision yourself. So what might that freedom look like?
Well, I'm going to be very honest with you. Freedom looks like freedom of being able to walk down any street in the 50 states of the United States and driving down any street without being stopped for being Black. Freedom looks like Black people and brown people can actually be able to sleep safely in their beds at night without actually having someone breaking in and killing you. Freedom also means being able to wear a hoodie, in a neighborhood, and not being stopped. To jog down any street and not being stopped. To be able to watch birds in the park and not being called out for being Black. And the freedom to just breathe. To breathe. That's what freedom looks like. Freedom looks like the ability to just breathe without fear.
And from a spiritual perspective, how might we get there?
From a spiritual perspective, we all have to do our work. Each individual has to do the work, has to be prayerful, has to continue to stand up in principle and in truth, has to join hands together. We have to listen to each other. We have to speak truth. And we have to know that we are all one. One.
Yeah, because it really is an inside job, right? It's living from the inside out.
Absolutely.
So, it seems trite, but, Gandhi said we have to be the change we wish to see in the world. So the work that we have to do in order to set all of us free is we have to be doing the work to set ourselves free.
That's absolutely right.
Right.
Absolutely.
That it is we have to turn within and we have to listen and be willing to surrender and allow Spirit to guide us into the next step, the next indicated step, and then take action from there. And then help bring that consciousness as we evolve our own consciousness and clear out the things that have been holding us back in the release form, like Michael Beckwith says, 100% of spiritual growth is in the releasing. So it's releasing
Yeah.
those ties that bind, releasing those chains that we have been bound by, or that we have even used upon ourselves, right? Because it's the emancipation from all discord is it's a freeing ourselves, and it's a freeing our society as a whole, right?
Yes.
That there's an opportunity to use the spiritual principles and the spiritual tools that we have been given, that we have learned, and to use spiritual truth to set ourselves free. And then in
Yes.
so doing within each one of us, we then become a clearer transparency, a clearer vessel through which, when our lives change individually, or even our thoughts or ideas change individually, then that begins to ripple out into the larger community to affect the larger community. Is that?
Absolutely. That's our work. That's our world work. And as we know that truth for ourselves, then we can take that truth out into our communities. But we got to do the work. We got to do that inside work so that we can show up authentically when we show out. When we join the major causes, we have to be coming from that place of love and coming from that place of unity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Because it comes from that centered place, right? That allows us really to do the work, to then be the presence of love, like we talk about here at Riverside, to be the presence of love in the world, or to be the presence of love in any given situation. That's then our opportunity, is to be that presence and stand in that presence, and allow then the larger work to work through us from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We got work to do.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's the one thing that we recognize, is we got work to do, but we're starting now. And I think this feels so different from any of the other times before. I think we are at that pivotal point in this work now that we can actually start seeing some change. Things are already starting to happen, and we just have to keep pushing forward and keep standing in that truth and keep doing this work until it's done. Mm-hmm. Until all God's children can raise our hands and say, free at last.
Absolutely. Well, and it really ties into, I mean, recognizing our unity with our brothers and sisters and siblings, that we are all walking this path together, that it is not, that, there is this one journey. There may be many paths, but it is this one journey, and that we're all, as Ram Dass said, we're all walking each other home, and also in that same speech from Dr. King, he talked about that we have to realize that our freedom is inextricably bound to everyone else's freedom. Yes. That we can't walk alone, that we are all in this together. And so I think that's also where we have the opportunity to do the work in spiritual community, like you're doing there in Las Vegas, of doing this work together.
Yes. Yes. And continuing these conversations. Reverend Jeff, this is a wonderful opportunity for your center to start rolling this ball down the road as well. I mean, we are all called at this moment, and I'm just grateful to be here starting off the first conversation, because they're so important. They're so important, and there's so many people whose voices we need to hear.
Oh, absolutely.
And, just doing this kind of work, it actually just rolls it out throughout the community. So we know, and we've seen in our own center, that this is just the beginning of greater things to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And, worldwide, and then also within our centers, within Centers for Spiritual Living as well.
Absolutely.
And with our own individualized centers as well. I Absolutely. Shared last week with our community here that over 100 CSL ministers have come together to study the book by Layla Saad, the Me and White Supremacy. And so we are dedicated to doing the journaling work and the work. And, it was already in the works, but I love how Spirit works, right? Because it was already planned for the summer, and then the events of the summer have been happening. And so it just what might have been a smaller group of people coming together has just exploded, and people are like, yes, this is the time. We need to be doing this. We need to be doing this work. We need to advance this work, in Centers for Spiritual Living, because, like we're saying, if not us, then who, right?
Yes, that's right.
If not Centers for Spiritual Living, then who? I mean, honestly,
Absolutely.
we have technology, So I thank you for being with us here this day, for joining us this morning to be part of this ongoing conversation that we're having, and to really speak to freedom and what that means for us as spiritual beings, having a spiritual experience
Yes,
on this planet.
absolutely. It's my pleasure.
I thank you. And
My
so
pleasure.
So, beloveds, I'm going to invite Shelia. She knows us already, so that's why I'm talking about her in third person for a moment. I am going to invite my beloved Shelia here to center us in prayer, to center us into spiritual mind treatment around freedom, around this topic that we've been discussing this morning, trusting and knowing that Spirit uses her like nobody's business. So I ask you, Shelia, if you would be so kind as to lead us in prayer.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Let's all just take one deep collective breath of life, knowing that God is in that breath. It is the very breath of our life. Knowing that there is only one power and one presence active in the universe and in my life. That one is God. God is freedom. God is the peace that passes all understanding. God is that light, that vision, that life. And right here and right now, I claim that vision for each and every one of us, knowing that I am one with it and it is one with me. It is the very living center of my being. It energizes me, it breathes me, it operates in, around, and through all things. And as I know right now and right here, this truth, it is true for me and true for each one within the sound of my voice. And I claim right here for this day, let freedom ring. Let freedom ring throughout each and every American, each and every person within the sound of my voice, each and every church, synagogue, ashram, and individual worship places, knowing that we are all one, all unified, all doing the world work that needs to be done to allow this freedom to spread throughout the entire planet. As each and every one of us joins hands together, surrounding this big blue planet and raising the vibration of freedom, raising it to its highest level, knowing that it is our truth. It is our truth for a world that we know can work for each and every one of us. If we all just do our work individually and collectively, knowing truth. I am so grateful for this knowing, so grateful for God showing us how and in this moment to be that which we can be. Better world, a better place for each and every one of us, operating in a higher vibration of love, the love that actually does live with each one of us, and that love that lives here. I simply send this word into the action of love and law, knowing that it is already done. It is whole, it is complete, it is perfect in this now moment. I simply let go and let God. And so it is.
Love